Title: The Guardian, A Shadow Before the Throne. Prologue: The Unwritten Truth. Before he stood at Silvern's side, before his knowledge became a weapon, before his allegiance was forged, he wandered through the forgotten corners of magic, seeking, studying, conquering. His name was whispered in ancient tombs, feared in the halls of sorcery, and cursed by those who knew what true mastery meant. But his journey was never for power alone. It was for understanding, and it led him to Silvern. Chapter 1: The Scholar and the Ritual. Dee was not born into power. He was not a king, not a warlord, not an heir to ancient bloodlines. He was a scholar, and that was far more dangerous. In the libraries of Acorus, where ink-whispered secrets and tomes held the weight of entire forgotten empires, he read everything. Not simply the history of conquest, not just the incantations known to mortal mages, but the hidden rituals, the kind that should never have been transcribed. Dee learned that magic was not meant to be contained. It was meant to be understood, shaped, bent towards something greater. And as his mind stretched beyond the limitations of mortal scholars, his humanity began to thin. He had seen glimpses of true sorcery, but knowledge alone was not enough. And so the rituals began. The first was carved into his own skin, sigils inked in blood, tracing old symbols that vibrated with the echoes of lost tongues. Each incision carried purpose, shaping his form into something beyond flesh. His hands trembled, not from fear, but anticipation. With each new rite, his soul did not fracture. It adapted. He spoke the first spell that was never meant for human tongues. The walls of his chamber trembled. The light flickered, not with warmth, but with warning. And in that moment, Dee became something else. Chapter 2: The Pact of Darkness. Dee did not fear the abyss. He had read its name in texts that no longer existed. He had whispered its syllables in languages that no scholar dared to study. And now he stood before the doorway, carved into the bones of forgotten gods, sealed with runes that had not faded, but waited. He had mastered magic, but it was still not enough. So he stepped forward. The chamber was silent, yet something breathed, not with lungs, not with life, but with the weight of knowing. This was not a prison. It was a presence.
You would bargain.
Dee did not flinch.
You would surrender.
He did not speak. Not yet. He had read this encounter before, in ink that had long since dried, in verses that had been erased from history. But now he was living it.
You would give yourself to something greater.
The magic he had known before, the sorcery of men, of kingdoms, of gods, was limited. It had boundaries, rules, laws that could be bent but never broken, and he wanted more.
Then kneel.
Chapter 3: The Century of Mastery. The first sacrifice was time. Dee no longer moved as mortals did, no longer counted his days in the rhythm of the sun or the turning of seasons. The pact had bound him to something else, an existence woven into the fabric of magic itself, a presence that could never be ordinary again. The second sacrifice was identity. No name would define him now, no history would bind him. He was no longer a scholar seeking knowledge. He was knowledge, a vessel carrying the weight of spells older than creation itself. He walked the forgotten halls, the ruins untouched by kingdoms, the libraries sealed in tombs, learning the sorcery that had been cast aside, not for weakness, but for fear. The third sacrifice was limitation. He did not merely study spells anymore. He wrote them. He shaped incantations that carried his own mark, magic that did not borrow from the past but created something new. And yet, it was still not enough. He had mastered the forces that shaped kingdoms, that shattered civilizations, that turned mortal men into gods. But then he heard whispers, not of magic, not of kings, but of something absolute, something beyond sorcery, something named Silvern. Chapter 4. The Hunt for Perfection. Magic was not enough. Dominion was not enough. Mastery was not enough. Dee had spent centuries shaping spells that could erase kingdoms, summoning forces that mortals feared to even name. He had rewritten the very laws of sorcery, transforming magic from an art into an absolute truth. But still, there was something missing. Then the whispers came. Not through books, not through rituals, not through the voices of scholars too afraid to seek the abyss as he had, but through time itself. A name. Silvern. It was spoken in half-truths, in ancient tongues that had forgotten their own origins. It was not bound to magic, not tied to kingdoms, not something that could be learned. It simply was, and so Dee moved beyond knowledge, beyond spells, beyond power, and into his hunt for perfection, the relentless search for a force that did not obey magic, the force that could not be destroyed, the force that could not be denied, the force that was Silvern himself. Chapter 5. The moment of realization. The gray tower loomed above him. It had stood for longer than time could measure, wrapped in silence, bound by history, untouched by war. But Dee did not look at the stones. He looked at him. Silvern sat upon his throne, watching, waiting, knowing without words that something had changed. He was not surprised. He had seen worship before, seen those who had come with reverence, with terror, with fear. But this was different.
"You are more than they say,"
Dee whispered, his voice barely above the hum of the universe itself.
"and yet—"
His fingers curled at his sides, his breath steady, his heartbeat too controlled.
"you are still incomplete."
Silvern did not react, not immediately. He had seen gods fall, seen empires rise and crumble, seen every form of devotion and obsession. But this was not ordinary admiration, nor simple allegiance. Dee did not simply seek him. He needed him. Silvern narrowed his gaze.
You know nothing of completion.
Dee's lips curled into something unreadable. A smile, perhaps, but one too sharp, too deliberate, too filled with something unnatural.
"Then let me find it in you."
The tower did not shake. The throne did not shift. But something settled, an understanding, a claim unspoken yet already forming. Dee was not just a seeker anymore. He was bound to Silvern. And it was the beginning of something inevitable. Epilogue. The Silent Watcher. From that moment, he was no longer simply a master of magic. He was the guardian. Not a ruler, not a destroyer, but the keeper of knowledge, standing eternally beside Silvern, ensuring that what he had found would never fall, never be forgotten. His name was whispered in the halls of those who studied the past, his legacy etched in the ruins of lost kingdoms. The magic he had shaped, the power he had wielded, the centuries he had devoted, all of it had led to this. He was not a seeker anymore. He was the shield, the shadow, the watcher who never turned away. And in the silence of the gray tower, where eternity stretched into infinity, he remained. A presence, a force, a devotion that would never break.